Russia just challenged a Ukrainian attack helicopter over contested lines. At first, it looked like the Mi-24 Hind had no chance of escaping. But what happened in the next few minutes shocked everyone watching and changed the way Russia viewed its own frontline defenses against Ukraine's air power. At 3:12 p.m., a Ukrainian Mi-24 Hind gunship rose above the tree lines near the contact line in eastern Ukraine. It was painted in camouflage and carried a full load of 80 S-8 unguided rockets. The helicopter moved low and slow, flying deliberately within sight of Russian forward observers. To Moscow's troops on the ground, it looked like a reckless move, one they could exploit. They believed this was their chance to score an easy kill against one of Ukraine's iconic gunships. The helicopter appeared exposed, its engines leaving a visible heat plume across the horizon. The kind of signal that man-portable air defense systems, MANPADS, were designed to detect. Within minutes, Russian operators stationed just 3 kilometers away spotted the Mi-24 crossing their zone of fire. The Russian team had a 9K-38 Igla system positioned inside a dug-in fighting hole, its infrared seeker tube already warmed and ready to lock. The Igla team had been waiting for a target exactly like this. According to Russian doctrine, the operators were supposed to fire the moment a helicopter or low-flying jet entered their 5-kilometer range. The Igla was light, portable, and deadly, weighing just 18 kilograms, but capable of hitting targets at over Mach 1.5. On paper, it was exactly the kind of weapon that could eliminate a slow-flying gunship. The Mi-24 was not a stealth aircraft. It was big, loud, and hot. In Russian training manuals, helicopters like the Hind were considered prime targets. The operators believed this was their opportunity to take one down. But what they didn't realize was that the Ukrainian helicopter crew had planned this moment. The Mi-24 was not flying recklessly, it was bait. Its pilots had been briefed on Russia's patterns, on how Igla teams deployed near tree lines and riverbanks to wait for exposed helicopters. They knew if they pushed just far enough, the Russian team would reveal itself. The Hind's crew deliberately flew low, making itself visible and then unleashing a ripple salvo of S-8 rockets across the terrain. The unguided rockets slammed into the ground in long arcs, shaking the area with shockwaves. Dust clouds rose across the fields, while splashes erupted along the riverbanks. To the Russian operators, it looked like the helicopter had opened fire blindly and was now exposed while reloading and repositioning. It gave them confidence that the target was distracted. They thought the pilot had made a fatal mistake. The reality was different. Those rocket salvos were not intended to hit hardened positions. They were designed to create chaos in the thermal spectrum. Each rocket impact burned intensely for seconds, creating a wave of heat signatures across the battlefield. For an infrared seeker like the Igla, it meant clutter. Multiple heat sources flared up across the ground, confusing any missile trying to distinguish between the helicopter's exhaust and the hot fireballs burning across the terrain. The Hind's crew had turned the open field into a defensive screen. The Russian team didn't notice the trap. One operator steadied his shoulder launcher while the spotter tracked the helicopter's line of flight. The Mi-24 banked slightly, presenting its side profile, and for a few moments, it looked like the helicopter was fully within the kill zone. At that distance, the Igla should have been a guaranteed hit. Convinced this was the perfect opportunity, the operator called out the target, centered his sights, and prepared to fire. What followed would determine not only the fate of the helicopter, but the credibility of Russia's air defense teams along the entire sector. At 3:13 p.m., the Russian Igla operator squeezed the trigger. A plume of smoke erupted from the launcher and the missile streaked upward, accelerating to Mach 1.7 as its seeker locked onto the heat signature pouring out of the Mi-24's twin engines. For the Russian team, it looked like a textbook shot. The missile carved a white trail through the blue afternoon sky, homing fast toward its target. In the Ukrainian helicopter, warning lights flared red. The crew's SPO-15 radar and infrared warning receivers lit up instantly, indicating that a missile launch had been detected. Both the pilot and the weapons officer reacted without hesitation. The pilot slammed the control stick to the left, banking sharply while dumping 12 flares in quick succession. The countermeasures fired from the sides of the fuselage, glowing bright orange as they ignited and trailed downwards. Each flare burned hotter than the helicopter's engines, designed to pull the missile's seeker off course. But the Russian team had confidence in the Igla. Its seeker was advertised as being resistant to flares, designed to ignore decoys and home in on genuine exhaust. For a moment, it looked like the missile might cut straight through the wall of countermeasures. The Heinz crew braced for impact. But here's where it got interesting. The S-8 rockets the Mi-24 had fired earlier were still burning across the fields and riverbanks. Each impact had created not just dust and noise, but intense heat plumes scattered across the landscape. To the missile's seeker, the battlefield lit up with dozens of competing signals. The flare barrage only added to the confusion. At first, the Igla's guidance stayed true, arrowing toward the helicopter's engines. Then, halfway through its climb, the seeker began to waver. The missile veered slightly right, then left, as the thermal clutter overloaded its sensors. By the time it reached the cluster of heat signatures, it locked onto a burning rocket impact crater on the ground instead of the helicopter itself. The missile detonated in a fireball just meters above the dirt, harmlessly away from the Mi-24. Shockwaves rolled through the Russian position as they realized the shot had failed. Their ambush, meant to score a quick kill, had only exposed their location. From the air, Ukrainian signals intelligence operators monitoring the battle immediately picked up the Igla's launch plume. Thermal sensors and radio triangulation marked the origin point in less than 90 seconds. Coordinates were instantly relayed through secure channels to a nearby FPV drone unit. Unlike Russia's rigid chain of command, Ukraine's system was decentralized and digital, designed to compress decision time. While the helicopter maneuvered back into cover, Ukrainian drone operators launched a kamikaze FPV quadcopter from a hidden tree line. It skimmed low over fields, flying at treetop level to avoid detection. The drone carried a small 1.5-kilogram warhead, just enough to take out a two-man team and their equipment. By 3:18 p.m., the drone was already halfway to the target. The Russian operators, unaware of the danger above them, scrambled to relocate their position. They tried to pack up the Igla launcher and move, but the muddy ground slowed them. With no armored vehicle support, they were exposed. By 3:20 p.m., the FPV drone crested the tree line and locked onto the Russian team. Operators on the Ukrainian side guided it manually, using a live video feed. At 3:22 p.m., the drone dove straight down on the Igla team. The warhead detonated with a sharp crack, obliterating the operators and scattering their equipment across the field. In less than 10 minutes, what looked like a golden chance for Russia had turned into a fatal mistake. The helicopter was untouched, and the Russian front line had just lost one of its rare air defense teams. By 3:25 p.m., the blast that wiped out the Igla team was already feeding into Ukraine's wider command network. Drone operators uploaded the strike footage, and within minutes, the confirmed kill was circulating among Ukrainian frontline units. What mattered most wasn't just the elimination of one launcher, it was the psychological impact. Word spread quickly. Russian man-pads had been hunted down in minutes. The same bait tactic that saved the Mi-24 now became a playbook for other helicopter crews operating along the front. For Russia, the loss was more than 2 soldiers and a launcher. Man-pads teams were scarce and critical. Each one required weeks of training and was often deployed in pairs to cover vulnerable sectors. With one gone, a gap opened along that stretch of front line. Ukrainian planners seized the moment. The Mi-24, still intact, climbed back into the fight. Its pilot circled wide, joined by another Hind gunship on standby. Both helicopters now had more freedom of movement. Without the threat of immediate man-pads fire, they pressed deeper, providing close air support to infantry units holding a nearby trench line. Here's where things got even worse for Russia. The missile launch had exposed the position of not just one team, but the wider defense network. Ukrainian signals intelligence operators scanned for chatter and intercepted frantic Russian radio traffic. Units nearby were ordered to reposition, fearing more drone strikes. That movement created chaos. Vehicles shifted out of cover, headlights flashed, and electronic emissions spiked. Each signal was another beacon for Ukrainian sensors. At 3:30 p.m., an M142 HIMARS battery received fresh coordinates from the intelligence feed. The system was preloaded with GMLRS rockets, each capable of striking targets within 80 kilometers. Within 2 minutes, a ripple launch of 6 rockets was in the air, arcing high before diving on the Russian fallback positions. Explosions erupted across the fields, destroying supply trucks and wounding troops attempting to reinforce the Igla sector. The chain reaction was brutal. Russian commanders had intended for the Mi-24 ambush to demonstrate strength. Instead, it triggered a wave of Ukrainian retaliation. By 3:35 p.m., FPV drones were swarming the area, hunting for anything that moved. Several captured video feeds showed Russian infantry abandoning dugouts and running across open ground, prime targets for drone operators. Each strike added to the growing tally of destroyed equipment and eliminated manpower. For the helicopter crews, this was validation. The bait tactic had worked perfectly. One risky flight designed to look careless had drawn out an enemy launcher. The failed missile shot revealed a position, the follow-up drone strike neutralized it, and the ripple effect allowed artillery and drones to hammer everything around it. Within 20 minutes, what started as a single missile launch ended with an entire section of Russian frontline air defense collapsing. Meanwhile, Ukrainian infantry along the trenches advanced cautiously, using the chaos as cover. They reported that Russian fire from the sector had gone silent, clearing the way for counteroffensives. The Mi-24s strafed with cannon fire, sending bursts of 30mm rounds into enemy positions, while ground forces pushed forward under the umbrella of air support. This was the kind of synergy Ukraine had been waiting for: bait, strike, exploit. In Russian channels, panic set in. Telegram groups associated with frontline units began warning other MANPADS crews not to fire unless absolutely cleared by higher command. The fear of instant drone retaliation was spreading. Operators who were supposed to act decisively now hesitated, worried that their missile plume would paint a target on their backs. This hesitation degraded Russia's overall air defense grid across that sector. By 3:40 p.m., Ukrainian commanders declared the zone open for aviation. More helicopters were cleared to fly close support missions, something that had been nearly impossible hours earlier. The trap had worked, and Russia's mistake had turned into a tactical victory for Ukraine. By 3:50 p.m., the battlefield around that sector looked completely different from how it had started. What began as a confident Russian attempt to down a Ukrainian Mi-24 had ended with smoking wrecks, silenced positions, and open skies for Ukrainian aviation. The helicopter, which Moscow's soldiers believed would be an easy kill, had not only survived, but had set the trap that collapsed an entire pocket of defenses. The message was unmistakable. Hesitation kills, and Russia had hesitated at the wrong time. Ukraine's command was quick to exploit the results. Drone operators documented every stage of the ambush and its aftermath, sending the footage up the chain. By evening, the videos were circulating on secure networks as training material. Commanders emphasized the importance of bait tactics, decentralized drone coordination, and lightning-fast artillery follow-ups. The lesson was clear: one flare, one launch plume, one careless radio transmission. And Ukrainian systems would find you, fix you, and finish you before you could relocate. For Russia, the consequences spread further than the loss of a single MANPADS team. The frontline chatter made it clear that other units were rattled. Crews tasked with operating Igla or Verba launchers began to delay their firing decisions. Instead of reacting instantly, they second-guessed, waiting for clearance or scanning for drones overhead. This hesitation meant Ukrainian helicopters could fly bolder missions, darting in low for rocket salvos or strafing runs, and darting back out under the cover of terrain. In a war where seconds decide life or death, that split-second pause gave Ukraine the edge. At the same time, Russian commanders faced a new problem: replacing the destroyed team. Each MANPADS operator required specialized training and coordination with nearby units. Losing even one launcher reduced coverage across kilometers of front line. To plug the hole, Moscow would have to shift resources from elsewhere, leaving another area exposed. Ukraine's decentralized structure thrived on this. For every Russian gap, there was a Ukrainian plan to exploit it with drones, artillery, or attack helicopters. By 4:10 p.m., the ripple effects were obvious. HIMARS crews reported secondary explosions from destroyed supply trucks, confirming that ammunition had been caught in the chain reaction. Drones continued to scan the fields, picking off stragglers trying to regroup. On Ukrainian radio nets, pilots and infantry passed the same phrase: "The air is ours." For once, the sense of dominance belonged not to the side with more missiles, but to the side with quicker decisions and smarter traps. The political weight of the encounter also mattered. Ukraine broadcasted fragments of the ambush footage within 24 hours, framing it as proof that Russia's much-advertised air defenses were brittle when tested by adaptive tactics. The narrative was powerful. Russian troops had tried to hunt a helicopter, failed, and instead triggered their own destruction. International observers noted how effectively Ukraine combined old Soviet hardware with modern Western intelligence and drone warfare. It wasn't just a battlefield win, it was a public demonstration of ingenuity under fire. For Russian soldiers still in the trenches, the takeaway was grim. Firing a missile at a helicopter, once seen as a quick route to a medal, now looked like a death sentence. Each trigger pull risked exposing them to drones, artillery, and counterstrikes. That kind of fear eroded confidence and discipline, making units slower and less aggressive. For Ukraine, that hesitation was as valuable as destroying tanks or artillery. It meant freedom to maneuver in the skies. By 4:20 p.m., the Mi-24 that had baited the trap returned to base, its fuselage scorched from near-miss fragments but fully operational. The pilot's report was blunt. Enemy fired. Enemy destroyed. Air clear. In less than an hour, Ukraine had not only survived a Russian ambush, but turned it into a victory that rippled across the entire sector. The final message was clear for both sides. For Russia, every shot carried the risk of swift annihilation. For Ukraine, bait worked, drones struck fast, and control of the skies was now within reach.